Well, we have come together this afternoon at what is a sad and difficult time for you as family and friends of Scott Rogerson. On behalf of the close family, I'd like to thank you all for being here today to show your love and your support towards them at this difficult time. My name is David and I'll be leading the service, and I'd like to extend my own condolences to you in your loss today. We're here to do three things. We're here to remember and to celebrate Scott's life together. We're here to give thanks for all that he meant to you, his family and his friends. And then lastly, however difficult it may be to do so, we're here to say our final farewell to him. Someone once said that grief is the price we pay for love. And so today, as you who loved Scott and who were loved by him gather together like this at his funeral service, that sense of grief, that sense of loss must be very real to you. And it's okay to feel that sadness today. There's no need to hide it. There's no need to push it down in any way whatsoever. Over the years, I'm sure you will have shown your love towards Scott in many different ways. You'll have spent many a happy hour in each other's company, all because of your love each to the other. And today, because of that same love, you gather in sadness and in grief. It's the same love that is being felt in your hearts. It's the same love that is being shown towards Scott today. I'd like to make a couple of announcements at this point to say, first of all, that donations in his memory are to go towards Alaw Ward in Ysbyty Gwynedd, and there will be a plate on the table by the door here should you want to donate today on your way out. And then secondly, the family would like to invite you all for refreshments at Tremfan Hall after the service, where you can continue to share your memories of Scott together there. But to begin our service, I'm going to ask Ellie to come forward and read the first poem for us.
This is a poem called Bilbo's Last Song by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is part of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Day is ended, dim my eyes, but journey long before me lies. Farewell, friends, I hear the call, the ships beside the stony wall. Foam is white and waves are grey. Beyond the sunset leads my way. Foam is salt, the wind is free. I hear the rising of the sea. Farewell, friends, the sails are set. The wind is east, the moorings fret. Shadow long before me lie, beneath the ever-bending sky. But islands lie behind the sun, that I shall raise ere all is done. Lands there are to west of west, where night is quiet and sleep is rest. Guided by the lonely star, beyond the utmost harbour bar, I'll find the heavens fair and free, and beaches of the starlit sea. Ship, my ship, I seek the west, and fields and mountains ever blessed. Farewell to Middle Earth at last, I see the star above my mast.
Thank you, Ellie. Beautifully read for us. Thank you so much. We're going to listen to Scott's favourite song now, Running Bear, by Johnny Preston.
On the bank of the river stood Running Bear, young Indian brave. On the other side of the river stood his lovely Indian maid. Little white dove was her name, such a lovely sight to see. But their tribes fought with each other, so their love could never be. Running Bear, love little white dove, with a love big at the sky. he couldn't swim the raging river, 'cause the river was too wide. He couldn't reach little white dove waiting on the other side. In the moonlight he could see her throwing kisses across the way. Her little heart was beating faster, waiting there for her brave. A running bear, love little white dove with a love big as the sky. Running bear, love little white dove with a love that couldn't die. Running bear dove in the water, little white dove did the same, and they swam out to each other. Through the swirling stream they came. As their hand touched and their lips met, the raging river pulled them down. Now they'll always be together in that happy hunting ground. Running bear, love little white dove with a love big as the sky. Running bear, love little white dove with a love that couldn't die.
And now Peter and Emma are going to come up and share their memories of Scott for us.
Yeah? Okay. Well, Lord Scott of Rogerson. Ash Wednesday, no less. Someone has a sense of humour. Firstly, you're my second cousin, once removed, I think, and then became my second stepdad. And I don't mind saying that this has been somewhat of a phenomenon that has pickled most people's brains, but I just found it funny. We got back in touch when Ellie was around 6 or 7, my Ellie. Pete and Liz would call saying, we're in Roscollon, Scott and the kids are down. Do you want to come over for dinner? So it was about a decade after my own excellent dad had buggered off this mortal coil, and I was keen to reconnect with family again. So I jumped at the chance. We met up at Bangor's fab cottage not far from our own in Roscollon. I was revelling being back in touch with him, larger than life, with stories and ex-wives galore. We cooked and we drank and we ate. The kids were kind of forced to get on. I needed the odd 10 minutes to go for a crafty fag, something that I don't think Ellie's ever seen me do, which I'm always grateful for. But this really cemented a great relationship, and Scott and I kept in touch, and we would meet up whenever he was in Roscollon. The last time I saw him in Glengorse, Mum happened to be visiting my granny in 4 Mile Bridge. Somehow, we all ended up at the Anchorage, the local that my grandparents frequently visited. Now, given the family history at play here, this kind of frazzled mine and Rachel's brains just a little bit. The next thing I know, I'm at work in one of my clients' homes in Llanor, and noticed what I thought was Scott's Merc in the driveway next door. Didn't overly think the thought because, I was busy, but after a little while I learned, or really rather realised, the connection. My client, friend, Auntie Jill, was the mum of Rachel's best friend from school, and she'd actually sold their original home to Gina and Scott. Gina and Steve, Scott's best friend, and they'd been visiting. Anyway, at this point, I had zero clue that there was anything going on. A month or so later, and I get a call from Mum or Scott saying they were down, as in locally, and do I want to meet for a brew, which I obviously did. It was clear from this that they were indeed a couple, and it seemed that it came so naturally to both of them that there was no need to make any sort of we're dating announcement. I guess the rest is consigned to history. Mum and Scott were married soon after. It was a leap year, and Scott decided that as he liked his notable dates, having previously got hitched on Valentine's Day, that it was perfectly reasonable for the two of them to marry on the 29th of February, because only a complete fool could forget that one. Shortly after this momentous occasion, after a turbulent time in my own life, for which I was eternally grateful for Scott's expertise knowledge over port at their home in Chorley, the newlyweds moved to Mynydd, Penllyn. Scott's parents had, years ago, lived close by at Landskill on Ford Glyn in Llanbedrog. So North Wales had been in Scott's sights for his dotage for several years. Either around Roscollin or Llanbedrog, ties to both locations were strong. I fondly remember the house hunting trips that they made all over the Llyn, staying and dining at Tremvan, where they'd had their wedding. We saw a good few houses. Eventually, they set their sights on Miriant Rise, with stunning 180-degree views. Little did we realise just how misty and foggy Mynyddoch could actually be. But as many of you will have realised through Mum's multiple social media posts, the views from their beautiful home were stunning. And it was soon after renamed Landskill Uchaf, in keeping with the family tradition, with the addition of Uchaf to indicate the elevation from the house close by in Llanbedrog. The years passed by quietly for Mum and Scott. They trundled along, having many birthdays, Christmases, beaches explored, and paths trodden. Over lockdown, I started to keep chickens. We vividly remember one time when we were allowed to have visitors again. Scott was inspecting the chickens' accommodation. He characteristically perched on the wall to have a ciggy, surveying and critiquing as only Scott knew how. The next thing we see are his legs up in the air, and he's fallen backward, tumbled down quite a steep boulder slope. I am, at this point, pegging it down the hill, round the rockery at the bottom, to find Scott balled up like Toad of Toad Hall, only for him to spring up to his feet and declare, "I'm okay, nothing to see here." And I'm sure that his ciggy might actually have been intact. From that day on, after seeing my gorgeous and soon-to-be very spoiled birds, he was determined that I should rename one of them Vienna. I'd already picked out a perfectly awesome name for this particular bird, Princess Leia. Scott, however, kept on singing the Ultravox song over and over again. I was adamant that I was not going to rename my bird, and because I am as stubborn as he was, I would never rename any of my birds Vienna. Although I may do that now as a small caveat to him. Anyway, a year or so ago, a friend of mine tried to convince me into rehoming a tiny little bundle of kitty fluff that had been rescued from her mum's field. Now, we at Clogwyn had just been cruelly deprived of our gorgeous pets, Lola and Bitsy, and had not long since welcomed Mr. Sparkles to the family. We were not in the market for another anything. Susie used all of her wily powers to try and get me to adopt this abandoned chicken, but this lady standing before you was not for turning, and thank God I stood firm. After a day or two of feeling 1,000% guilty, I had an Einstein lightbulb moment. Scott wanted a pet. So picks up the phone, I does, and I calls them, and I says, "So you know how you've always wanted to call something Vienna? Well, I might have the perfect solution. We will discuss and call you back," was his response. I kid you not a single minute had passed, and the kitten had a new home. Vienna was the newest resident of Landskill Uchaf. Mum and Scott had a new plaything, all of their own. That year saw quite a bit of change at Landskill. Jacob, Scott's grandson from his second marriage, came to stay from Australia in need of help and guidance. I think that he's found both from Mum and Scott, and life on that score has been a challenge, one that has seen growth and understanding on both sides. I am in awe of how their input, along with other support, has turned Jacob's life around. I know that Jacob will miss the various philosophies of Scott, for there have been many, to be sure. There was one area, however, where Scott and I enjoyed a good amount of banter. Having visited Egypt and the pyramids a good few times in years gone by, coupled with his love of a good book, Scott believed himself to be somewhat of an authority on the subject. I've lost my place. Simon and his ability to absorb information from YouTube like a sponge always liked, or rather enjoyed, to challenge Scott's opinions. Heated discussions would involve phrases like, "Your books are simply outdated," and, "Oh, but I've been there and I've seen them." Anyway, given that I now have the final word on the matter, Scott, I'm afraid that there is nothing you can do to alter my opinion that, in place of any solid evidence to the contrary, aliens must have built the pyramids. Sleep well and sweet dreams.
Well, Scott, you always had the capacity to surprise, and your departure from this world came as a surprise to everyone. You've usually managed to upstage in every situation, yet again you achieved this in spectacular fashion. I was lying on bed in agony, having damaged ligaments in my arm. I couldn't move because of the pain. The ambulance paramedics were coming up the stairs when my phone rang. Liz answered it. It was Emma to tell me that Scott had died. It took me several days to digest this piece of information, helped by large doses of prescribed morphine. Scott has been part of my life for as long as I can remember. There were times when our lives diverged, but fate always brought us back together. In early years, our two families often met as they lived only half a mile away in Row Green, Worsley, although the 3-year age gap meant that during school days we were never close friends. I was closer at the time to his sister Sally, who sadly lost her battle with liver disease in the early 70s. I know that losing Sally was very difficult for Scott. He was also very close to his mother, Sheila. When she died of cancer, it hit him hard. It was from his mother that Scott inherited his wonderful wit and sense of humour. Scott was a conundrum. He was very intelligent with encyclopedic knowledge of history, films, and Formula One racing. He was, however, inclined to lack common sense, a trait which was displayed at an early age when he and Martin Farnworth built an aeroplane out of 3 planks of wood. They were about to launch it off the garage roof with themselves as pilot and passenger when Martin's mother fortunately appeared to halt the operation. When he was a little older and still a student, he was driving home from a night out when he took a shortcut across a roundabout, writing off his Mini. He was able to charm the fireman who cut him out of the wreckage to persuade the police that he was too badly injured to take a breathalyzer test and couldn't give a sample until many hours later, by which time most of the alcohol had disappeared. It was at Scott's first wedding to Polly that we first met his lifelong friend, Steve Sr., who was best man. Steve shared many of Scott's wilder moments in life, such as getting stuck on a beach in France in a 4x4 with the tide coming in. They were rescued by the town's fire brigade just in time. After his wedding to Polly, Liz and I moved back north from London, and by the time he joined his family business, Lightbounds in Salford, in 1979, he and Polly were divorced. Fate found us both working in the same building in Salford, albeit for different companies. We built up a friendship and would often lunch together and play squash after work. It was on one of our Friday lunch excursions that I became aware of Scott's imperious streak. It was my turn to drive into Manchester, and we were passing Marks and Spencer's when a voice next to me boomed, "Stop the car!" Somewhat surprised, I pulled into the side of the road. "Wait there," he announced, "I'm going shopping." As he got out, I shouted, "I'll see you at the pub," and drove off. Scott would always try to arrange things in a manner convenient to himself, and it was not good practice to pander to his whims. He was also a regular visitor to our house, where he enjoyed playing with the children. More recently, when he stayed overnight, so he could visit his optician, he arrived, walked straight through the front door, and as he strode through the house, he said, "I must have a ciggy." He then opened the back door, tripped up, fell and broke his arm. We spent some time in A&E, and he had to stay with us until the following Monday, when we were due to go back to Anglesey. I was then able to drive his car to Bangor, where he was met by Maggie. When we stayed with him, it was quite normal for us to cook our own breakfast. Scott rarely cooked, although his kedgeree and chilies were noteworthy. He would either be having his morning ciggy or watching the Grand Prix on television. At about 10 o'clock, we would tentatively ask about breakfast. A typical reply would be, "Oh, there's bacon in the fridge. I'll have mine well done, and could you serve the toast overdone and cold?" Liz would serve it burnt and straight from the fridge. When Scott moved up to Manchester, he met his second wife, Krista. Steve was also best man at this wedding. Scott was very happy with her, and she adored him. There was, however, one problem which proved unsurmountable. Scott wanted children, and Krista could not provide them. So very sadly, Krista was left behind, and although they remained good friends, it is typical of Scott that when Krista's grandson Jacob needed respite from Australia, Scott immediately offered a place in his home. I confess that I was responsible for the introduction which led to his third marriage to Sally Ann. The result was two lovely children, Ellie and Noah. It was perhaps inevitable that the combination of Sally's ambition and Scott's natural desire for an easy life could not be reconciled, and they divorced after a few years. Scott and the children came round often, and we went on many outings together, as well as holidays in Roscommon. Scott was most generous and insisted on paying for the cost of the accommodation. However, we did most of the cooking and took the children for walks, so Scott was able to chill out. On one such holiday, staying at Glangorse, Scott, Ellie, Noah, myself and Liz were joined at the anchorage in 4 Mile Bridge by Michael, Ruth and my parents, Dee and Tommy. As Emma has already mentioned, Maggie suddenly walked in, spent the whole evening chatting with Scott, came to Glangorse the following morning, and the rest, as Emma noted, is history. Scott gave the outward appearance of someone who was full of confidence. This was far from the truth. Scott needed people around him. He needed a partner who he could rely on, although he wasn't quite sure how to manage the situation when he got one. He was quite indolent, very opinionated, and somewhat egotistic. What will be remembered, however, is he was very generous, welcoming, loyal, entertaining, people-loving, humorous, erudite, charming, and often quite self-deprecating. He was also, apart from being my second cousin, a very, very good friend. I'm not the only person here who will miss him dreadfully. He was unique. He was irreplaceable. He was Scott. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for those tributes to Scott today. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Rachel now to come forward and read the second poem for us.
So to finish off, I'm going to read a really lovely little poem called The Dash by Linda Ellis. I really hope you take it all in and take it home with you because it's really, really good. So I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on his casket from beginning to the end. He noticed that first came the date of his birth and spoke of the following date with tears, but he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that he spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved him know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our little dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you would like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what is true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we have never loved before. If we remember, if we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your little dash?
Thank you, Rachel. Well, we come to that part of the service now where together as a congregation we will say that final farewell to Scott. And I'm going to ask you please to stand for this part of the service. I'm sure you've seen all the photographs scrolling along the screen behind me, but there is also this photograph on the front of the order of service. And I'm going to ask you to take just a few moments in silence to gaze at that photograph, and as you look at it, to allow one memory to rise up in your hearts of Scott. And as you hold that memory in your heart, just say a silent thank you for all that he meant to you in your life. And we come now to the words of the committal. The last act of love is saying farewell to your loved one. You received Scott as a gift, which you cherished and appreciated. You loved him as he loved you. You shared life together. You supported and carried each other in turn. You created memories together. You loved each other. And the last act of love is saying farewell to your loved one. But as you say farewell to Scott and commit his body to be cremated, you will keep in your hearts all the memories you created together and all the love you shared. And with that same love, you will continue to remember Scott well and continue to support each other through your journey of grief and beyond. And we'll close the service now with a final piece of music.